Adrian Colt's story began like a storm no one saw coming, the kind that appears suddenly on a clear horizon and leaves an entire town shaken. Brookhaven was small, predictable, and proud of its peaceful reputation. That reputation shattered the night businessman Landon Pierce was found dead in his office with evidence pointing directly at Adrian. Fingerprints on a wrench, his truck caught near the crime scene, and a large deposit in his bank account created a picture that looked obvious to investigators. The trial was quick, the verdict even quicker. Adrian was sentenced to death while maintaining the same claim from the moment of his arrest. He had been framed. The public didn't believe him, and the case was soon treated like a closed chapter. But the truth was only beginning to unfold, and the key to everything rested in the hands of a woman the world almost forgot existed. Mara Ellington, Adrian's longtime girlfriend, avoided the spotlight so carefully that many doubted she was real. She kept her life private, living quietly in a rented apartment, working odd jobs to stay off the radar. Her silence wasn't distance, it was fear. She knew things others didn't, pieces of Adrian's life and people around him that never made it into the courtroom. Throughout his years on death row, she visited him faithfully, bringing notes, newspaper cutouts, and small fragments of information she found on her own. Nothing she uncovered was strong enough to change the case. Hope thinned with every rejection from lawyers who refused to reopen the investigation. As the execution date approached, Adrian sent Mara one final letter asking her to be present during his last day. It was his only request. When she entered the prison, she looked exhausted yet strangely composed. Their meeting was silent, heavy, and filled with unspoken meaning. Before guards led him away, Adrian pressed a piece of folded paper into her hand. Inside was nothing more than a symbol, an uneven sideways triangle with a line cutting through it. It made no sense, yet Mara slipped it into her pocket with care, as if she already understood it mattered. She left the prison calm and expressionless, and just hours later, Adrian was executed. 2 weeks passed before a mysterious package arrived at the Brookhaven Police Department, containing financial documents tied to Landon Pierce's illegal dealings. The same strange symbol was marked on the corner of every page. Investigators quietly reopened the case and discovered links to Elias Burnett, a wealthy developer with hidden connections to Pierce. Evidence that had been overlooked, or deliberately buried, surfaced piece by piece. Surveillance footage, phone logs, bank transfers, all pointing toward a setup. By the time the truth began to form clearly, Mara had vanished completely. Her apartment was abandoned except for a locked wooden box containing copies of the evidence she had been gathering for years. Adrian hadn't given her a goodbye symbol. He had given her the final direction she needed to expose everything. And she succeeded, just before disappearing forever. The weeks following the reopening of Adrian's case brought a level of quiet chaos no one outside the investigation knew about. The town of Brookhaven stayed unaware while federal agents moved discreetly, tracing every connection attached to Landon Pierce's secret financial activities. The symbol found in the package puzzled investigators at first, but a pattern emerged quickly. It appeared on spreadsheets, on corner margins of bank logs, and even inside encrypted files. Someone had been marking a trail long before Adrian's execution, and the markings always led back to the same cluster of people, those who had testified most confidently against him. While authorities worked in silence, rumors and small inconsistencies began to reappear, like old dust rising when a forgotten room is finally opened. The story the town thought it knew started to fracture. Among the first major cracks was the revelation that Adrian's truck had been accessed by another person on the day of the murder. Records showed a spare key unaccounted for, one that Adrian claimed had been missing months before his arrest. During the trial, this detail was dismissed as irrelevant, treated as a careless mistake rather than a potential clue. Now, investigators learned that Elias Burnett had been seen at a repair shop Adrian once worked at, close enough to have taken a spare key without notice. This raised questions that no one had dared ask earlier. Why would a wealthy developer involve himself in such a crime? And how deep did his connections run? Each uncovered detail pulled the case further away from the simple narrative presented years back. Adrian was no longer looking guilty. He was appearing as the perfect scapegoat. While authorities stitched these fragments together, Mara Ellington remained a ghost. Her disappearance created a legend of its own. Some neighbors said she left weeks before the package arrived. Others claimed they saw her slip into a car late at night with a small suitcase. The only certainty was that she was gone. The wooden box found in her apartment contained copies of documents, photographs of warehouses, and handwritten summaries of conversations she must have secretly recorded. She had been investigating long before anyone realized. The symbol Adrian handed her wasn't a clue he created in prison. It was something they had discovered together, something tied to the group that framed him. Mara had simply waited for the final piece, the one Adrian passed to her minutes before his death. Her silence wasn't cowardice, it was strategy. As more evidence surfaced, a clear picture formed. Landon Pierce had been part of an underground financial ring, laundering money through properties linked to Elias Burnett. When Pierce threatened to expose him, Elias needed a quick solution. Adrian, with his criminal record from a past unrelated incident and his proximity to Pierce's office, became an easy target. Investigators pieced together a timeline showing how evidence had been planted, witnesses coached, and files removed from official archives. The deeper they dug, the more one fact became unavoidable. Adrian Colt had died for a crime orchestrated by men with power, and the one person who had fought hardest for him had vanished after ensuring the truth could no longer be buried. The investigation gained momentum as federal agents widened their search into the network surrounding Elias Burnett. Files retrieved from old servers, property records, and deleted communication logs painted a picture far more complex than anyone expected. What initially seemed like a simple financial dispute spiraled into evidence of a multi-state operation involving shell companies and ghost accounts. Money moved in strange patterns, always passing through the same symbols marked in the documents Mara had collected. It became clear that whoever used that symbol had been tracking the movement of funds long before law enforcement had even noticed anything unusual. Adrian and Mara had stumbled onto something dangerous without realizing how far it stretched or who might be watching them. One of the biggest breakthroughs came when investigators uncovered a storage unit rented under a false name connected to Elias. Inside were old ledgers, bags filled with burner phones, and stacks of receipts that had never been submitted as part of the original case. Among them was a file containing photographs of Landon Pierce taken weeks before his death, each marked with the same symbol Mara had seen. This raised an unsettling possibility. The financial ring wasn't only about hidden money, it involved surveillance, coercion, and possibly multiple victims. Pierce's murder was beginning to look less like a single conflict and more like a warning meant for others involved in the network. Adrian had been framed because he was close, vulnerable, and easy to manipulate. The timing of the deposit into his bank account aligned almost perfectly with the day someone wanted to shift attention away from the true culprits. While authorities processed this information, they continued searching for Mara. She was the missing piece, the one person who clearly knew more than she had revealed. The evidence she left behind suggested she planned her disappearance carefully. Surveillance cameras near her apartment captured her walking out early one morning with a backpack, her phone left behind, her bank account untouched for days after. A neighbor admitted noticing unfamiliar cars passing through the area multiple times that week, but none stayed long enough to raise suspicion. This only added to the uncertainty. Was Mara running from danger, or was she working independently to finish what she and Adrian had started? Investigators traced the symbol again and again through the documents, eventually linking it to a small consulting firm that shut down just months before Pierce's death. Every employee listed in its registration had vanished from public records. The firm specialized in data security, digital tracking, and asset protection. It was possible the symbol wasn't criminal at all. It may have been an internal marker used by someone trying to expose the network from the inside. This raised disturbing questions about the true number of people caught in the web of Elias Burnett's operations and how many had paid the price for getting too close. As federal agents worked quietly, new pieces kept emerging, each pointing toward a deeper conspiracy. The closer they got, the more apparent it became that Adrian and Mara had been circling this truth long before anyone realized. Mara's disappearance now seemed less like an escape and more like a final step in a plan she and Adrian had silently constructed, one designed to topple the men responsible, no matter what it cost. The pressure surrounding the investigation intensified as agents connected more missing elements. What started as an effort to clear Adrian's name evolved into a hunt for a larger criminal structure. Each new discovery revealed how many people were involved, how many files had been manipulated, and how deeply the corruption had sunk into institutions that were supposed to protect citizens. One detail stood out. Every person who had played a key role in Adrian's conviction had either financial ties to Elias Burnett or unexplained assets that appeared shortly after the trial. Nothing connected them openly, but subtle patterns, timed deposits, sudden purchases, and shared associations, showed a silent agreement among those who helped close the case quickly. It was as if a coordinated effort had been executed to ensure Adrian became the perfect distraction. Agents revisited the original crime scene with new eyes. They noticed details previously dismissed: such as fingerprints belonging to individuals never questioned and security footage that appeared to have been edited before being sent to the court. The original detective who handled the case had taken an early retirement soon after the trial and moved out of state. An internal review confirmed he had a history of ignoring critical evidence, yet no one had ever held him accountable. This strengthened the idea that the investigation had been carefully shaped from the beginning. Adrian's guilt served the interests of people who needed the public's attention directed away from their own dealings. Meanwhile, the search for Mara reached a dead end. No financial activity, no digital footprints, no travel records. It was as though she prepared to vanish long before Adrian's execution. Agents found an abandoned cabin 2 hours from Brookhaven with signs someone had stayed there briefly, and used food supplies, a map with markings along old highways, and a worn notebook containing symbols similar to the ones found in her apartment. The thought that she operated under her own strategy became undeniable. She wasn't simply hiding, she was moving through a plan Adrian had likely helped her form, a plan built on the knowledge they had gathered secretly while the world focused on the trial. As the investigation deepened, an archived email thread surfaced between Landon Pierce and an unknown sender. The messages referenced unauthorized financial transfers, someone threatening to expose the operation, and a warning about consequences for disloyalty. The final message indicated that Pierce was preparing to hand evidence to federal authorities. Days later he was dead. This revealed the motive behind his murder clearly, and it highlighted that Adrian's presence near Pierce's office was orchestrated, not coincidental. Someone had tracked his habits, positioned him at the wrong place at the wrong time, and planted the evidence before law enforcement even arrived. The discoveries tightened the noose around Elias Burnett, but what concerned agents most was the realization that Elias was not the mastermind. He was another link in a chain extending far beyond Brookhaven, a chain reaching people with greater influence and deeper pockets. The investigation had started with Adrian's desperate claim of innocence, but it now pointed toward a silent war happening in the background, one Mara appeared to understand better than anyone else. Her disappearance now felt like the final stage of a mission she had sworn to complete, a mission she and Adrian had prepared long before the world realized the truth. The closer agents came to understanding the machinery behind the conspiracy, the more dangerous the investigation became. Key witnesses disappeared before they could be questioned, servers containing critical information crashed without explanation, and anonymous warnings were sent to the lead investigators. It became clear that the people behind the network were monitoring every move. The deeper the agents dug, the more they realized that Adrian and Mara had been navigating this danger years earlier without protection, relying only on each other and the clues they uncovered in secret. Their efforts, mostly unnoticed during Adrian's trial, now appeared intentional and methodical, as though they had known a moment like this would eventually come. What seemed like desperation on Mara's part was gradually understood to be preparation. The breakthrough arrived when agents found a hidden directory on one of the corrupted servers. Someone had embedded data inside a series of broken files that appeared useless unless decoded properly. Inside this directory was a full timeline of transactions connecting politicians, law enforcement officers, and business owners to the financial network Elias Burnett operated. One name stood out among the entries: the prosecutor who handled Adrian's trial. His involvement was not minor. He had facilitated the suppression of evidence and received financial benefits through indirect channels. This discovery shattered any remaining trust in the original verdict. Adrian had never stood a chance, not because the evidence was convincing, but because every influential person involved had been motivated to secure a conviction. As the investigation expanded, Elias Burnett attempted to flee the country using a private flight registered under a false identity. He was intercepted at a small airstrip, and the arrest quickly drew national attention. Yet Elias refused to explain anything, keeping silent even as charges mounted. The agents realized Elias's silence wasn't loyalty, it was fear. There were people above him who demanded silence, and he understood the price of breaking that unspoken rule. However, even without Elias speaking, the evidence was enough to dismantle most of the criminal network. Accounts were frozen, properties seized, and officials placed under federal investigation. Adrian's innocence was formally recognized, but the announcement brought more sorrow than relief. The man who always insisted he had been framed was gone, the truth arriving years too late. Even with the case unraveling, the one question haunting investigators was the same: where was Mara Ellington? The clues she left behind showed intention, not panic. There were maps detailing routes she might have taken, coded notes referencing people she planned to meet, and symbols marking safe locations she and Adrian had identified before his arrest. These signs made it clear she hadn't run from justice or danger. She had run toward the final piece of the truth. Weeks later, a final envelope arrived at the FBI headquarters with no return address. Inside was a flash drive containing the last segment of missing evidence, a recording of a conversation between two high-ranking officials discussing the plan to frame Adrian. It completed the puzzle entirely. The envelope contained one more item, a small paper bearing the same symbol Adrian had given her on the day of his execution. Below it was a single sentence in simple handwriting. This was his way of finishing what they started. There was no signature, no clues, no trace. Mara had delivered the final blow from the shadows, then vanished again. Whether she was alive, protected, or still moving through the world with purpose, no one knew. But one thing was certain. Adrian's last wish had set everything in motion, and Mara had honored it until the very end.